Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Munib Hamid with the news of the hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. President Joe Biden says chaos was unavoidable following the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. In an interview, Biden acknowledged he was stunned by the swift collapse of the US-backed Afghan government and forces. He said US forces will stay in Kabul even beyond the August 31st deadline for a total withdrawal until every American is evacuated. Meanwhile, former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has pledged to return, saying he left to prevent bloodshed. In Burkina Faso, at least 47 people, including 30 civilians and 14 soldiers, have been killed in a militant attack in northern town of Arbinda. The Ministry of Communication said 19 civilians were injured in the attack on a convoy of civilians and security forces. The ministry added at least 58 militants were also killed in a combat with government forces. Muslims around the world are observing Ashura, the largest religious mourning. The day marks the martyrdom of Prophet Muhammad's grandson, Imam Hussein, in the Battle of Kabul, fought in 680 AD in southern Iraq. This year, amid the coronavirus pandemic, the scaled-back gatherings will be held while taking the necessary precautions. Brazil has recorded over 1,000 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 42,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 74 more people lost their lives to the virus and over 4,300 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus caseload has surpassed 209 million, while the death toll is over 4.39 million. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. President Joe Biden says chaos was unavoidable following the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. He defended his administration's handling of what many are calling a hasty pullout. This report has the details. The United States has come under fierce criticism over the matter, and Biden himself acknowledges he was stunned by the swift collapse of the US-backed Afghan government and forces. In an interview, the US president said he did not know if there was a way to exit the country without chaos ensuing. Biden said the Taliban are cooperating on letting the Americans get out of the country. He added that US forces will stay in Kabul even beyond the August 31st deadline for a total withdrawal until every American is evacuated. Earlier, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said there have been no hostile interactions with the Taliban. Talking to reporters at Pentagon, Austin noted the lines of communication with the group remain open. Speaking alongside Austin, top US General Mark Milley said the intelligence clearly indicated multiple scenarios, including a Taliban takeover, but stated there was no intelligence that government and security apparatus would collapse in 11 days. Meanwhile, former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has pledged to return, saying he left to prevent bloodshed. During a live social media broadcast, Ghani said he will continue working to achieve justice for Afghans. All right, now for more on this, we are joined by Arshad Yousafzai, a political analyst from Peshawar. Arshad, thank you very much for joining us. Now, Arshad, President Joe Biden has admitted that chaos was unavoidable following the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. Why did Biden stick to his decision of a hasty pullout, despite knowing the aftermath and whether the US would be blamed for further unrest in Afghanistan?
I think President Biden and the US military had realized that any delays in going out of Afghanistan, any extension in the stay was not going to help anybody. They were aware that the Taliban were getting angry and that they were getting impatient because the deadline was approaching and the US withdrawal was not completed. So to avoid any further issues with the Taliban, as the Taliban had already complained a number of times that the U.S. was violating the Doha Agreement. So the U.S. decided to leave out early without realizing what it could mean for Afghanistan.
Right. Also, Arshad, former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has pledged to return to his country. Is this possible in the near future, and will the Taliban allow his re-entry?
I don't think President Ghani seriously means this, because he shouldn't have left. He shouldn't have left when the Taliban were giving pardon to everybody. And I've been hearing reports that higher Taliban commanders, even in their speeches in Kabul and elsewhere, while they're addressing these massive jirgas or meetings of the people who are gathered to greet them on their success, have been telling their fighters that even Dostum's money and his life and everything was haram on them, that they should not harm anybody, even Dostum or the toughest opponents. So they would have easily pardoned President Ghani. I don't think that he would return that easily. If he meant to return, if he wanted to come back, the Taliban wouldn't harm him. That's what I believe. But still, it is very uncertain, and it's too early to decide for him to come to Afghanistan. And even his statements wouldn't really bother the Taliban now, because they are in control of everything. And they have successfully managed talking to other leaders who were present in Kabul and who had some reservations, which I believe have been sorted out last evening since Anas Haqqani met them.
Right. Also, tell us, the British Army chief says this time the Taliban could be more reasonable this time. Do you think the Taliban has changed, and whether their government will be run differently than the previous one?
It looks like, yes, the Taliban have evolved greatly. Their leadership is polite, that they are pardoning people. It has never happened in the history before that they have pardoned or someone has pardoned their worst enemies. They believe, some of them jokingly say that we are going to reset the example of Nelson Mandela, that we are going to forgive everybody and that we are going to move forward relatively easy this time. Although, they have decided about bringing revolutionary changes in many things, there is still uncertainty about how are they going to do it. They are trying to get people who are experienced in many fields and departments, but still they will have to sort out many challenges in future.
Right, absolutely, definitely. Arshad Yousafzai, thank you very much for your time. Now, as Afghanistan reels under the Taliban's nascent knee rule, the world scrambles to prevent more chaos in the country and the region. This report has more. The Taliban of 2021 brandish themselves as changed Taliban. Many hail this as a silver lining, while some remain skeptical and ramped up diplomacy to counter the global ripple effect. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the future of Afghanistan depends on where the Taliban's policies are heading. In a phone call with Turkish counterpart Mevlut Cavusoglu, Wang said the Taliban's most recent remarks have sent positive signals to the outside world. Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan also welcomed the moderate statements made by the Taliban leaders. He pledged readiness to extend all kinds of cooperation for peace in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel held a phone call with US President Joe Biden and Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Merkel and Biden discussed the need for the provision of humanitarian aid for vulnerable Afghans as well as support for neighboring states. While Merkel and Mirziyoyev said the two hold similar stances on the importance of a political solution in Afghanistan. Russian President Vladimir Putin also discussed recent developments in Afghanistan with Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi, while Putin and Tajik President Emomali Rahmon underscored the importance of normalizing the Afghan situation as soon as possible to maintain regional stability. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said the question of recognizing the Taliban regime is irrelevant at present. Earlier, he said power by force is illegitimate and that the Taliban must prove that they have changed. Meanwhile, European Union Migrant Commissioner Ylva Johansson said the bloc should focus on helping Afghan refugees in the region. She said Afghan asylum seekers must be prevented from undertaking dangerous journeys to reach Europe's external borders. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says an inclusive political settlement in Afghanistan is the best way forward. He said this during a phone call with his Dutch counterpart, Mark Rutte. Khan said Pakistan is closely following developments in Afghanistan and is in touch with the regional and international partners. He added the safety and security as well as the protection of Afghans' rights is critically important. Both leaders also agreed to further enhance mutual cooperation between the two countries in various fields. The Netherlands lauded Pakistan for its support and facilitation for its evacuation endeavours in Afghanistan. Now in Burkina Faso, at least 47 people have been killed by militants in the northern town of Arbinda. Authorities say the victims included 30 civilians, 14 soldiers and 13 army auxiliaries members. The Ministry of Communications said a joint convoy of civilians and security forces was ambushed in the Sahel region. It said 19 civilians were injured in the attack in the Seno province. The ministry added at least 58 militants were also killed in a combat with government forces. Militants regularly carry out attacks in northern Burkina Faso as well as in neighbouring Mali and Niger. The violence in the country has displaced more than 1 million people in over 2 years. Muslims around the world are observing Ashura, the largest religious mourning. The day marks the martyrdom of Prophet Muhammad's grandson Imam Hussein in the Battle of Kabul fought in 680 AD in southern Iraq. This year, amid the coronavirus pandemic, the scaled-back gatherings are being held while taking the necessary precautions. Public mournings and processions are underway in many countries, while Muslims are also keeping the fast. Pakistanis are also observing the occasion with due respect. President Dr. Arif Alvi has urged the nation to rise above hatred, malice and sectarianism in line with the teachings of Imam Hussein. While Prime Minister Imran Khan called for the countrymen to pay tribute to the Imam by supporting the truth and justice. Now, Brazil has recorded over 1,000 daily deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 42,000 cases. Globally, the coronavirus death toll is over 4.39 million, while the caseload has surpassed 209 million. More details about the pandemic in this report.
The governments have been concerned with the high contagious nature of the Delta variant, but to add more to their worries, a British study has found that protection from Pfizer or AstraZeneca vaccines against the variant weakened within 3 months. The US federal authorities say they will require nursing home staff to be vaccinated for participating in the Medicare and Medicaid programs. The health officials also said COVID-19 vaccine booster shots will be made widely available to Americans starting from 20th of September. However, the World Health Organization warned that wealthy countries' booster campaigns will leave poorer people to drown. The WHO's chief renewed call for a moratorium on booster shots to shift supply to countries that do not have access to jabs.
I was stunned by the news that J&J vaccines, fill and finished in South Africa, are leaving the continent and going to Europe, where virtually all adults have been offered vaccines at this point. We urge J&J to urgently prioritize distribution of their vaccines to Africa before considering supplies to rich countries that already have sufficient access.
While in Oceania, the situation is getting grimmer. New Zealand's cases have jumped to 21, but authorities said the virus may not have been in the community for long, as they linked its origin to a recent returnee from Sydney. Meanwhile, Australia has recorded the highest ever number of infections since the start of the pandemic in the latest Delta outbreak.
Every state in Australia will have to come to terms with the fact that when you get to a certain level of vaccination and start opening up, Delta will creep in. We can't pretend that we're going to be 0 cases around Australia of Delta. As the Doherty report says, once you get to 80% double doses and you have to open up, everybody's going to have to learn to live with Delta. Admittedly, in New South Wales, we're learning that earlier than others.
Britain has approved Moderna's vaccine as well for use in children aged 12 to 17, weeks after Pfizer's shot was given the green light. Meanwhile, a new report shows that almost 60% of hospitalized patients with COVID-19 in Israel are fully vaccinated. Facebook says it has removed over 3 dozen pages spreading misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered 74 more fatalities from the COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, bringing the toll to over 24,700. The Health Ministry reported more than 4,300 positive cases overnight, pushing the caseload to over 1.1 million. The ministry said over 999,000 people have recovered so far, while nearly 5,000 are in critical condition. Meanwhile, 44.7 million vaccine doses have been administered so far across the country, and 12 million have been fully vaccinated. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the EU countries have accused Belarus of conducting a direct attack by pushing asylum seekers across its border. Interior ministers of the 27-nation bloc agreed they need to strengthen their external borders in the future. The ministers issued a statement after an emergency meeting to discuss illegal border crossings into Latvia, Lithuania and Poland. They said Belarus is seeking to instrumentalize human beings for political purposes. The statement read, "This aggressive behavior is unacceptable and is aimed at destabilizing and pressurizing the European Union." Lithuania said the installation of a fence and a monitoring system could cost more than $585 million, while Poland said it had sent more than 900 troops to help secure its border with Belarus. China says it is willing to jointly promote cooperation with Arab states and seek for development together. President Xi Jinping made the remarks in a congratulatory letter to the 5th China Arab States Expo. The expo opened in the Yinchuan city of northwest Nigeria, China's Qinghai Autonomous Region. In his letter, Xi said the traditional friendship between China and the Arab states has strengthened over time. The Chinese president noted Beijing remains the largest trading partner of Arab states. The 5-day expo has attracted exhibitors from over 30 countries and regions and nearly 100 enterprises. Meanwhile, in Argentina, thousands of protesters hit the streets of the capital to demand work for the unemployed and better housing conditions. A group of social organizations affiliated with the left-wing Workers' Party convened and led the march. The leaders noted the demonstrations were carried out across the 22 provinces. The protesters demanded more social programs, public works and assistance at soup kitchens.
Millions of people don't have anything to eat. We are not talking of the near future. We are talking about tomorrow. A lot of families don't know what they'll be eating tomorrow. In the first place, we demand integral assistance and genuine work. Without any work, we won't leave, and we don't see this campaign discussing work. Everything is being discussed except genuine work, which is needed mainly by the youth in Argentina.
Well, now Turkey has offered to mediate between Ethiopia and Sudan to resolve border dispute over the Al-Fashaqqa region. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan offered mediation while addressing a press conference with visiting Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The president said Ankara is ready to make any contribution to an amicable resolution of the border problem. He also said Turkey backs a peaceful resolution for the Tigray conflict in Ethiopia. The Turkish president said Ethiopia has a strategic location and importance in Africa. Erdogan noted all regional countries will be affected by the worsening situation of Tigray. Erdogan and Abiy oversaw the signing of military agreements, including a military financial cooperation deal. The death toll from a 7.2 magnitude earthquake that struck Haiti on 14th of August has neared to 2,200. Flooding and heavy rains have interrupted the search and rescue efforts for the past 2 days. Prime Minister Ariel Henry said the devastating incident has left the nation on its knees. Authorities say at least 600,000 people are in need of assistance and 135,000 families have been displaced. Meanwhile, tremors shook buildings late on Wednesday in the southern city of Les Cayes. A police officer on patrol said there are no immediate reports of further deaths or damage in the region. Meanwhile, in the US, the Caldor fire in Northern California has nearly doubled in size overnight amid the wind and dry conditions. Officials say the blaze has charred over 53,000 acres and is 0% contained. More details in this report. Wildfires driven by the heat waves and accompanied by strong winds are continuously raging across the world. In the United States, at least 50 homes were burnt due to the Caldor fire, while 2 people with serious injuries have been hospitalized. Over in France, a wildfire in the Var region has left 2 people dead while burning over 12,000 acres of land and forcing thousands to flee, while Greek firefighters are struggling to curb a large wildfire that has been raging for the 3rd day in the outskirts of the capital Athens. In Argentina, blazes raging in the Cordoba province has destroyed 40 houses and prompted evacuations. Officials have warned of an extreme risk of fires throughout the province amid the dry and windy weather. Meanwhile, Algeria has accused 2 groups linked to Morocco and Israel of setting the recent wildfires in the country. It had recently designated them as a terrorist organization. Now, China has successfully launched Tianhe 2 satellites into the orbit. The pair is developed by the Shanghai Academy of Space Flight Technology. A Long March 4B carrier rocket blasted off from Taiyuan Satellite Launch Center in Shaanxi province. The satellites will be mainly used for scientific experiments and research. They will also be used for land and resources surveying and geographic surveying and mapping. The launch marks the 384th flight mission of the Long March rocket series. Now, Asian stocks have retreated after U.S. Central Bank made no firm decision on when to unwind support measures for the economy. The lack of a directive from the Federal Reserve fueled worries over the pandemic's impact on consumer spending and jobs growth. Hang Seng in Hong Kong led the losses, while down nearly 2%. The Kospi in South Korea lost more than 1%, half of a percent. Turkey's Nikkei 225 slipped over 1%. Mainland China's Shanghai Composite Index gave up almost 0.25%. Sydney's S&P ASX 200 declined nearly 0.5%. And now let's have a look at the weather updates from around the world.
Welcome to the weather update. We're going to have a look at the weather situation around the world, starting with Abu Dhabi, where weather is expected to be extremely hot, with temperatures rising to 40 degrees centigrade. While in Amsterdam, temperatures are at 21 degrees centigrade with a morning shower. If we're heading to Ankara, there is a clear weather with temperatures at 34 degrees centigrade. Moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 15 degrees centigrade with thin layer of clouds covering the sky. Now, if you're traveling to Bangkok, there will be an expected thunderstorm with temperatures around 35 degrees centigrade. In Beijing, temperatures are at 28 degrees centigrade with a partly sunny weather. While in Beirut, you will experience sunny weather with temperatures at 32 degrees centigrade. Bernalers will experience temperatures at 19 degrees centigrade under partly cloudy sky. If you're heading to Cairo, sun will be out with temperatures at 36 degrees centigrade. Down under in Canberra, the temperatures are at 15 degrees centigrade with clouds floating in the sky. And in Islamabad, the temperatures are at 37 degrees centigrade accompanied by partly sunny sky. While in Jakarta, you can see that the temperatures are steady at 32 degrees centigrade with partly cloudy sky in the forecast. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Raja Sarosh, for the weather updates. And with that, we come to the end of this news bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.news.